Hello and welcome to the south bank of the River Thames here in London. Just a stone's throw away is St Paul's Cathedral, and behind me you can see where a very modern London skyline meets a very old one. This is Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, a place where Shakespeare the man and his amazing plays are literally played out to a modern audience. Let's find out more about the remarkable man and the Globe Theatre itself. I'm going to go and meet Will.
Hello, Anne.
Hello, lovely to meet you.
Welcome to the Globe.
Will Tosh, Director of Education
Indeed.
here at the Globe.
Yeah.
This is the most amazing place to look at
isn't it?
because you've got this incredible mixture of the Globe, looking pretty Elizabethan, and the modern skyline.
Big global city over there. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it would have looked a little bit different in Shakespeare's time, but of course, don't forget there had been a whole bristling sort of cityscape of church spires on the other side of the river, and the old St Paul's Cathedral, not Christopher Wren's version, but it would have been a pretty bustling site.
But look how, really, it's bang in the middle of London, and it's exactly where it should be.
You can't really miss it.
Now, I've got my gloves on because it's going to be quite chilly, isn't it?
It's not the summer season, let's just put it that way. We are here slightly in the off
you're an
in the
open
off
air
months.
theatre. Tell me all about the Globe.
Well, why don't we go in and have a little look?
Yes, please. Oh, wow.
And here we are.
Everybody must say that when you show them.
They do. It's a common response. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yes. Go on, tell me all about the Globe.
So, Shakespeare's Globe is a replica of the building that was constructed in 1599, not far from here, only 100 metres or so, by Shakespeare's Theatre Company, the Lord Chamberlain's men. And it was the theatre that first saw performances of As You Like It, and Julius Caesar, and Hamlet, and Othello, and Twelfth Night, and King Lear, and Antony and Cleopatra, and all the greats that Shakespeare wrote at the height of his career. It was the most splendid and beautiful theatre of its time. It had an astonishing, dazzling 14-year life before the first Globe burned down in 1613.
Why did it burn down? What happened?
So it was a performance of Shakespeare's play, Henry VIII, lesser-known history, co-written with John Fletcher, during which a prop cannon was fired from the attic to create a sound, and in fact it wasn't a cannon for warfare, it was a cannon announcing someone's arrival, and a bit of wadding shot into the thatched roof, caught fire, and the whole building
thing burned down?
The whole thing burnt down in 2 hours. Everyone got out. No one was hurt. But the company lost their building. The company lost their stocks of props and costumes and things. But they rebuilt. They rebuilt the Globe in 1614. That's probably one of the last things that Shakespeare did before he retired to Stratford and then died in 1616.
Now, of course, we're hearing a plane go over, and you've got to acknowledge these things. But yeah, that's the modern day, because it was always open air, wasn't it?
It was. So the theatres of Shakespeare's time, these large theatres like this, Shakespeare's theatre, Shakespeare's Globe in 1599 could hold 3,000 people. Now, we don't hold 3,000 people today. We hold about 1,650.
Well, probably just because we've got different
rules. We're a bit bigger, and we have slightly more sensible rules about how many people can cram into a.
Well, because we're standing here in
so we're in the yard.
This is the yard.
This is the yard.
Where the groundlings.
Yes, groundlings, term coined by Shakespeare in Hamlet.
So these are people who have paid the lowest ticket price, I presume.
That's right.
And they're just all shoved in.
They are. So if you come.
Are they all standing like this?
Well, it depends on the play. If it's popular, yes. So if you come to the Globe in 1599, you pay a penny.
Yeah, oh, right.
1 penny to walk into the yard and take your place wherever you want to stand. You can pay another penny and enter the gallery and take a seat.
I see. Take a seat.
And if you have do you have another penny, Anne?
I haven't got one on me, but I'll owe you.
Anyway, you can. And after that, you could pay another penny to ascend one level up and go up to the middle gallery.
Yes.
Pay another penny for a cushion. And if you're really fancy, you could pay 6pence to sit in the little rooms above the stage.
So you're actually on the other side of looking out?
Yeah.
Mind you, it looks good to be up there, doesn't it? So basically, the more money you had, the higher you went?
More or less. I think probably an extra penny gets you up to the middle gallery It's not an extra penny to go even further higher, because that's not a better view. But that view over there, yes, you're sort of looking at the backs of actors' heads, but you're very close to the stage and you can hear everything brilliantly, and you can be seen.
Yes, you can be seen, which is
important.
But also, I mean, the actors, presumably then as well, play in the round almost, don't they? They play it to all of the boxes.
Yeah, this is not like a sort of modern, what's called a proscenium arch theatre, where you have a sort of, picture frame around the stage. You've got people sitting and standing over there. You've got them sitting and standing up there. They're everywhere. And when you're an actor on the stage, you need to know that.
And if you were here, if you were a groundling, I mean, Shakespeare's plays can be long.
They can.
Did you just have to stand up for the whole thing, or did people bring food?
People brought food. They bought food. You could buy apples and hazelnuts. You could buy beer. You could buy pamphlets. You could buy tobacco.
Yeah.
So you buy all sorts of things. It's a very you're a very captive market as a theatre goer.
And I suppose if it wasn't too crowded, you could actually sit down as well. Maybe.
You probably could. You can't nowadays. You'll get told off by our stewards because you're a fire risk. If
now
you
look,
down.
Here I am tugging at my because it's already feeling a bit nippy.
It's a bit chilly, isn't it?
So if you put on a play now, I don't know about then, could you bring an umbrella with you? That would.
I'm not sure they had umbrellas, but you could certainly wrap yourself up warm, definitely. And Shakespeare's company did perform through the winter. So a theatre like the Globe would have played through the year, certainly for the first 10 years of its life. And people did come. We know from theatre records from another nearby historic theatre that people came to stand in the cold in January, as we are now, and watch a play on an open stage.
Yes. Well, there wasn't any television.
There was no television. There was no television. There was no internet. There's nothing else to do.
No, that's right.
So this
was your entertainment.
This is popular culture.
Yeah.
This is where you see stories that relay histories of your country and the rest of the world. They tell mythological stories. They tell romances. They tell tragedies, sex dramas, comedies. This is where you get those full-formed narrative entertainments.
And because you've got your groundlings, who I presume, at some point were sort of standing like that, watching.
Yeah.
There had to be interaction between the actors.
And that's also sort of why they're called the groundlings, because a groundling is a kind of fish. So if you're standing here and looking up with your mouth open, that's
but look up.
Yeah, doesn't it look beautiful?
Oh, it's beautiful. And it would have been like that?
Yeah.
So, and you've got a hole in the roof there, obviously, for flying in people or whatever.
So this canopy over the stage was referred to as the heavens by theatre folk. The hell was under the stage. The heavens are above. And it metaphorically kind of represents the sky and the universe, but also, of course, it's beautiful. And it provides an access point, as you pointed out.
What do you use? When do you use that? What plays would you use?
So there are a couple of plays where there are flying entrances. A Tempest. There's a descent by a god. In Shakespeare's Cymbeline, there's a moment where the god Jupiter descends on an eagle.
Wow.
And of course, in lots of other plays that don't script an entrance on a wire, you could put one in.
Yes, well, absolutely. And trapdoors in the...
Absolutely. So in
stage?
In Shakespeare's Hamlet, the ghost of Hamlet's father, we know, in the script tells us, cries under the stage. Oh. So we get this spooky sound of a voice coming up from below.
And that's a stage direction,
That's a stage direction.
Were there many?
There are some. There are not as many.
I know there's going off pursued by a bear.
Yeah, there's pursued by... There's not a huge number telling an actor how to act. But there's quite a lot telling an actor where to be, or sort of what to do, or what the stage picture should look like. And most, we're quite confident that lots of them are Shakespeare's own.
Yeah.
Some of them are added by other members of the theatre company. Some are added by the print shop when the plays are finally printed.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting sort of, it's a kind of academic puzzle to sort of unpick who's responsible for what bit of a play.
And just being nearer here, I can see those beautiful boxes. They're very, ornate, aren't they?
They are. They're called the gentleman's boxes. And they're a bit of an experiment at the Globe, because you see the really beautiful stage painting, a beautiful roof, beautiful pillars. The rest of the building is actually quite functional. It's quite restrained, isn't it? It's quite kind of austere. And that was a choice made by the builders of this Globe, of our modern Globe, in the 1990s, to focus an audience's attention on the really beautiful painted stage. But the rest of this building should be highly decorated. The theatres were like jewel boxes. They were decorated all the way around.
So it wouldn't have been as plain as
It would
we
not
see.
have been as plain as this at all. And the choice was made to keep it plain.
Well, it screams Tudor,
So
actually,
exactly.
doesn't
So
it?
it says to us, this is a sort of Tudor building.
Yeah.
But these boxes here are a little experiment to see, well, how can we find an aesthetic style that says decorated, but doesn't distract attention from the painted stage?
Yeah.
So maybe one day we extend that beautiful sort of grayscale painting around the rest of the theatre.
And there's a thatched roof.
And there's a thatched roof, the
Now,
only thatched roof in modern London.
Well, I was going to say, given the history of
Yes.
this place and the fact that it burned down, and then didn't Oliver Cromwell destroy the second?
Well, not personally, but the second Globe did close in 1642 at the start of the Civil Wars, and that was it for this.
So how
building.
did you get permission to build a thatched roof?
Well, it was quite tricky. This Globe, this is not Shakespeare's original Globe. This is a reconstruction, and it was the brainchild of an extraordinary American actor and director called Sam Wanamaker, who came to the UK in the 1950s. He was a sort of McCarthyite exile from the US. Really important actor and director in UK theatre, passionate about Shakespeare and passionate about memorialising Shakespeare's presence in Southwark. He was really shocked that there wasn't a kind of big sort of commemorative sort of plaque somewhere saying this is, site of Shakespeare's Globe. I mean, there is a plaque, but it's in the wrong place and it has the wrong information. Okay. So he was quite disappointed. So Wanamaker was really determined to rebuild the Globe, and that was the project of the second half of his life. And he succeeded. He died some years before the Globe opened, but he was so committed to using Elizabethan building techniques to being as accurate as possible in rebuilding the theatre that Shakespeare knew, and that included a thatched roof. So lots of conversations with local authorities and planners and fire experts. This is a thatched roof that's treated with fire retardant. There are sprinklers in it.
Yeah, but it's healthy enough to grow moss.
And it's healthy enough.
And that would have been also in Shakespeare's day.
It would, exactly.
When you show people around, like you're showing me right now, which is wonderful, do people tend to get a bit boring for you, but they suddenly spring into Shakespeare?
I mean, it has happened.
They suddenly want to cry, a horse, a horse!
I sort of feel this is a leading question, Anne.
Well, you can't help it, can you?
Should we have a little go?
Oh, I'd love to have a little go.
Should we place you I'm going to call it the gallery, not a balcony, actually, because balcony isn't the word that's used.
But that's obviously where she does her speech.
Shall we place you on the gallery?
Oh, I think so.
Okay.
How can I say no?
You better go.
Okay.
Okay.
These are so good. They look so throaty, don't they?
So, Anne, I've picked up a couple of copies on our way upstairs, up into the gallery. Romeo and Juliet, the crucial gallery scene.
It's very high up here, isn't it?
It's higher than you think, but it does mean you get a wonderful view
Yes.
of everyone on your level.
Yeah.
But we're not doing the bit where Romeo and Juliet are on the balcony together. I'm going to leave you and go back downstairs,
all right.
because I think we should do Romeo, Romeo,
Wherefore art thou
Romeo.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's something every actress would want to do, and do it here.
Are you in the zone? Are you ready?
Well, I'll be in the zone, whether or not it appeals to anyone.
Right.
Yes.
Don't go anywhere.
All right. So you're going down.
I'm going down
there. So Juliet starts this not knowing he's around.
He's hiding.
She's just musing to herself, isn't she? She's doing, "Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father, and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet.
Shall I hear more, or shall I speak at this?
'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague. What's Montague? It is not hand, not foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for thy name, which is no part of thee, take all myself.
I take thee at thy word. Call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth I never will be Romeo.
What man art thou, that thus bescreened in night, so stumbled on my counsel?
By a name I know not how to tell thee who I am. My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself, because it is an enemy to thee. Had I it written, I would tear the word.
My ears have not yet drunk 100 words of thy tongue's uttering, yet I know the sound. Art thou not Romeo and a Montague?
Neither, fair maid, if either thou dislike.
How camest thou hither? Tell me, and wherefore? The orchard walls are high and hard to climb, and the place death, considering who thou art. If any of my kinsmen find you here...
With love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold love out, and what love can do, that dares love attempt. Therefore my kinsmen are no stop to me.
If they do see, then, they will murder you.
Oh, that's amazing, Anne. You've got the part.
Well, you have too. I quite like it. Well, oh God, it's just so wonderful being up here and saying that. This is every schoolgirl's dream, and there are 1,000 famous actresses must have done that very line from here.
Absolutely. I'll come up and join you again.
Yeah, this is incredible.
And here we are.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, as I said, so many amazing actors must have been part of this very theatre.
Absolutely.
And it must be a joy meeting them.
It really is. It's wonderful to work with theatre artists who know so much about the text as well. They approach it in such a brilliant and intelligent way. That's just a complete thrill.
When you first see your first big Shakespeare play, you can remember yours, I can remember mine. What was yours?
Mine was The Merry Wives of Windsor.
Oh,
when I was 5 years old, but I do remember it.
Bless. I remember the Tempest, going to see The Tempest in Stratford, and they did it in Victorian garb. It was set in a Victorian time, and it was incredible. There were lots of lights and thunderbolts and people swinging out from the ship's sails. That made me wonder, I mean, do you add modern touches to the original Shakespeare? Do you do it in different ways?
Yeah, absolutely. And Shakespeare's texts aren't stable. You know, there is no one way to do a Shakespeare play. And look, we've spent, so much time exploring original playing conditions in a theatre like this, and we're fascinated by it, but we're not beholden to it. What we want is artists and directors to come along and bring their own insights to a play. So Shakespeare's plays are classics because they mean something in many different contexts. You can put a Shakespeare play in a particular kind of world or time and it says something different. So that's so exciting to see directors do that. So to put The Tempest in a Victorian setting, amazing. Suddenly it brings so much more to the story. And our directors do that here. Our Romeo and Juliet this summer, directed by the wonderful Sean Holmes, will be set in a kind of Wild West environment.
Oh.
Obviously, Shakespeare knows nothing about that, but the story lands in a particularly brilliant way in that context.
Well, look how Romeo and Juliet in West Side Story is set in New York.
Exactly. Or Baz Luhrmann's film, sort of relocating those stories to other places, activate something in them.
Because those themes, as you said earlier, those themes that Shakespeare went with are timeless.
Yeah.
They really are actually timeless, aren't they?
They are timeless. I mean, Shakespeare is so much part of world culture. He's been a central part of the English language for so long. English language, through trade and empire and colonialism, goes around the world. Shakespeare goes with it. Shakespeare is everywhere. His work has soaked into lots of cultures around the world. People see human experiences in Shakespeare that they want to explore.
Which is why casting must be quite an exciting thing to do now.
It is. I mean, we mentioned that Shakespeare's company cast young boys as women's roles. It's always been up for grabs slightly, kind of who plays what role. And one of the things that lots of theatres nowadays are doing are not being so beholden to kind of traditional casting practices, and giving actors of all different genders and backgrounds and types the chance to work with really amazing roles, which in previous generations they would have been pigeonholed away from. And now the approach is much more, if you're a great actor and can say something about this part, have at it.
Do it, yes, as long as it doesn't spoil the original, I suppose.
I'm not sure you can spoil the original. I mean, nothing can spoil a heritage of performance or a heritage of literature. And a production's just a production. If you hate it, it's gone in a few months.
Yeah, absolutely. And there must be some nights where the weather plays a very big part. Presumably you've had to call off productions sometimes because the weather is...
Almost never.
Really?
Almost never. I can't think of a time in my memory where weather has caused the closure of the
Those
production.
poor groundlings down there being rained upon.
They get rained on.
I've even seen a photograph one year of being snowed upon.
Yeah. Yeah, we
The
have
actors go on, but there is a bit of shelter here.
Yeah. So the actors are covered, and although sometimes actors perform in the yard, which means they're not protected. No, audience members can get wet, they can get cold, but if they want to leave for 5 minutes and warm up and come back in, they can.
Well, if they want to see a bit of Shakespeare in the Globe, then that's what you have to put up with.
And I very much hope people do, because it's the most wonderful place to see.
It is. Right, well, let's go back down to the stage and you can tell me more about what you're doing at the moment and what your job entails.
I will.
Because that sounds fascinating. Will, it's an absolute knockout just to be here and to be here on the stage. Do you still get excited walking in here and thinking, wow, this is me?
I get hugely excited. And just to look around and see not only a building that is an incredibly accurate replica of an important historical theatre, but a beautiful building that has almost 30 years of its own history now. You know, that's what's sort of almost more exciting, is that it's combining both the long history of Shakespeare performance and Shakespeare theatre history and the more recent history, 3 decades history of experimentation and artistry and audiences having the time of their lives and audiences getting rained on and sort of the life of London for the past 3 decades.
Yeah, it's got a character. You can feel its personality.
Absolutely.
I am already convinced that Shakespeare was here. Because, and I know this is a replica, but it really does have its own personality, doesn't it?
It really does. And I mean, so this is, as you know, this is very slightly in a different place to the original Shakespeare's
just
Globe.
moved
It's
slightly
just
up.
moved a little bit upriver.
Why is that? Why couldn't you build on the original?
So the original Southwark Bridge sort of crosses through the site of the original, or Southwark Bridge Road crosses through the site of the original. So that would have been quite a hard one to swing with the council.
Yeah, well, of course, there's been a long, long period between the ending of the original Globe and then the building of this one.
And it wasn't known for a long time precisely where the Globe remains were.
We do know now.
We do know now.
Yeah, but this is just up a bit. But it's basically the same size, the same feel.
So there's lots of historical and academic dispute and debate about precisely the size and shape of Shakespeare's original theatre. Probably we're a little bit big, and we may have 1 or 2 more sides of our polygon than Shakespeare's original Globe, but it is the closest possible replica that could have been made in the 1990s when it was designed. So we have a real kind of faith in the accuracy both of the stage arrangements and the audience arrangements and the relationship between actor and audience and between the performance and the light and things like that. Those are the sort of really crucial performance effects that we feel we get really right.
Do you ever sit back and think, I wonder what Shakespeare would think of this?
All the time, but not just about the Globe. I'd wonder what he would think as a writer of his own time, who's become a global figure, a global icon, a historical, one of the most famous people in history.
Yeah, and amazingly, they say he's more popular now than ever. His popularity is still growing, and it's global. And I know that your job is something to do with education, keeping the generations just really enthused. How do you do that?
So we have a sort of split mission at the Globe. We're a theatre and we're also an education charity. So we want to be the best place in the world to appreciate the works of Shakespeare, whether that's on stage or in the classroom or in a university seminar or on the page or as an experience just visiting a building like this. So I'm Director of Education here, looking after higher education and research. So I'm a Shakespeare academic. I study the works of Shakespeare in his life and times, and I teach university students and adults, and I run research programs asking questions about the way his plays were performed, the way he used his theatres and other performance spaces, but also asking questions about his relationship to his own time and country and culture, and how that time and country and culture made itself known in his plays. And I suppose we try and get people excited by that, partly through telling stories on our stage, and there's lots of connections between our education and research department and our theatre department. Sometimes that's a matter of having discussions with directors who are planning to put on a Shakespeare play. Sometimes it's having conversations with new playwrights who are writing stories set in the world of Shakespeare or kind of or a time loosely connected to Shakespeare. But it's also through teaching the students who come through our doors, talking to visitors who don't have to be students, writing books, writing blogs, writing articles, talking to you, and talking to your viewers, and sharing some of that excitement that we feel about his work.
I was wondering how you hook them in, because there are various things about Shakespeare that and what he wrote. Plays what he wrote, that sort of excite people, that things that they don't know, like, you know, the phrases that we use in everyday modern language. We don't know. We use them all the time. We don't know. Shakespeare wrote them.
Of course.
Things like Wild Goose Chase comes from Romeo and Juliet. I mean, there are lots of them, aren't there?
There are loads, and there are also, you know, Green-Eyed Monster from Othello and
Green-Eyed
things
Monster,
like that. And it's partly that sense that Shakespeare's work, even if you don't know it, has filtered into the lifeblood of the nation and in many ways the world. Partly it's language, partly it's the way we express ourselves, but also it's storylines and sort of themes in plays or TV shows or film dramas or other modern plays that, even if unconsciously, are drawing from the heritage of Shakespeare's plays. I'm also always really struck how, even today, people in the public eye, journalists or people or commentators, reach for Shakespearean metaphors when they're trying to describe the actions of contemporary people. You see it all the time in Parliament, you see it all the time in newspaper columns. There might be characters like Beth and Lady Macbeth or Hamlet, or those characters represent certain forms of human experience. And they're used by, they're our common reference point.
Yes, that's right. Green-Eyed Monster, you know, and you know, the Lady Macbeth idea, that if somebody's a Lady Macbeth, you know exactly what they're talking about.
Indeed.
There are phrases like the world is my oyster. That's another one. They pop up all the time. And again, you think if Shakespeare were here, I wonder what he'd think of that. The very phrases that he apparently invented are still being used by us today.
And I think that says something, it says lots of things about Shakespeare as a person, as a writer, as a philosopher, as a thinker, who has shaped so much of I think how we understand ourselves as people. You know, there's a really good reason why we look at a play like Hamlet and go, you know, this is a representation of sort of the first kind of modern thinker, the first person who thinks really deeply in a kind of anxious, angsty way about himself. And we look at that and go, we haven't seen that before in drama. And that influences so many later thinkers and writers and philosophers in the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries. They continue, as it were, to kind of keep Shakespeare alive. So fast forward to the 21st century, we don't necessarily always recognise that it's been past centuries that have also been kind of buoying Shakespeare up along the years to keep his work and his sort of themes and principles really lively. But that's a great sort of gift to us, because it means we can then look back at his work and the work actually of other dramatists of the same time and feel like we see ourselves in that time.
As Director of Education then, somebody who's constantly trying to enthuse, not that it can't be that hard for a lot of times, but you're constantly trying to enthuse people about Shakespeare. Do you liaise with the people who choose what you're putting on, the productions you're putting on at any one time?
Well, we do. So as a director here at the Globe, I have close conversations with our artistic director, who is solely responsible for deciding what goes on the stages. But we do have conversations about the sorts of plays that we think people might like to see. We do think about things like school syllabuses, or when in the season we might want to programme a particular play. If there's a play that's on the school syllabus, maybe don't programme it in August. You know, maybe programme it at the start or the end of the season. But also we want, you know, I'm an academic, I work with artists, we want to show as much as possible. So, for example, we've got a season coming this summer. Your viewers can tell this is not summer right now.
No,
as we
it
sit
really
here,
isn't,
sit here in our coats. But from April, we have a wonderful season that includes Romeo and Juliet, so very familiar and wonderful tragedy. We have Twelfth Night, Shakespeare's wonderful sort of bittersweet comedy. Merry Wives of Windsor, brilliant comedy, which is less staged, but people are going to absolutely adore it. We also have Troilus and Cressida, which is quite rarely performed brilliant exploration of war and cynicism.
Yeah, it's quite a serious work.
But it's actually quite brutally funny as well. It is absolutely the play for this summer. So we want that range.
What about new stuff?
Well, we look, for Shakespeare, the Globe was a new writing venue. Shakespeare wasn't putting on classics in 1599. Almost everything that was put on stage in Shakespeare's theatre and most of the theatres in early modern London were, if not brand new, then plays that were fresh into the repertory. It was quite uncommon to put on stuff that was
known.
That was old.
Yeah.
Well, known was okay, because it means you might get people in who like it. Old, not so much. So they want plays that are kind of current and speaking to the community then. And the Globe has been a new writing venue itself for the past 25 years. This summer just gone, we had the most wonderful new play called Princess Essex, about the first woman of colour to enter a beauty pageant in Edwardian Southend. Extraordinary play, just brilliant. It's not a new play, but we have Arthur Miller's wonderful The Crucible this summer as well. So a play again that couldn't be more relevant in terms of how accusations spread through a community. And we've never done Miller on the Globe stage, so that will be
quite something.
That will be exciting.
What about sort of experimental or different? You've got some things you're working on as well, which involve actors who are doing something but there's no rehearsal. You have to explain that one.
So one of the things that I love most about my job here is that I get to work practically and kind of in a live way with actors and theatre artists. Part of my job is exploring what these theatre spaces can do. So as well as the Globe, this beautiful space, we have an extraordinary indoor theatre called the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse, it's indoors. If only we were filming there right now, it would be much warmer, beautifully lit by candles, and it represents an indoor theatre that Shakespeare's theatre company owned for many years called the Blackfriars. We opened that playhouse about 10 years ago, and I've really loved just experimenting with what the space can do. So I run an experimental research program called Research in Action, where we run public workshops every summer, working with a range of actors and other scholars and investigators, just to ask about the space, to say, what can you do with a candlelit theatre? What kind of lighting effects can you create? What can you do with a sort of wooden jewel box theatre in terms of acoustics? What happens if you put a shawm player or a sort of violinist under the stage? What kind of sound can you create? What happens if you use incense? How does early modern theatre? What does it smell like? How can you kind of how can you crack open the plays of Shakespeare's time, Shakespeare's plays and those by other dramatists, and ask how they might have landed with early modern audience members. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, that's just a gift. I mean, it's a thrill.
We're exploring what this place can offer is interesting in itself. We've just heard an aeroplane go over. I mean, that is so weird, isn't it, when you think? Because you're almost transported back to Shakespeare's time just sitting here. And then a plane goes over. Or a party boat goes along the Thames with music blasting out. But this, I think, is what's such a brilliant about a reconstruction theatre is you're inviting an audience to think about what that means historically, but you're not pretending that we're going back in time. No one here is sort of deluded that we're in 1599. This is a modern theatre that sits in a very, very modern city and draws on audiences from London and from the UK and from all over. And it's that meeting point of an old text that still has meaning, a building which speaks to the past but isn't actually super old. This building is 30 years old, in a modern context. So when a plane goes over and actors on stage almost kind of like, roll their eyes, sometimes they have to. Yeah. That is great. That isn't a breach of some kind of sort of naturalism. That's an acknowledgement that this play is taking place right now. Pigeons fly in all the time. Pigeons land on the stage, usually mid-monologue. Oh, brilliant.
And so suddenly an actor isn't speaking to themselves or even to the audience. They're speaking to a pigeon that's just sort of, waddling around the stage. And it's amazing. It's such a kind of alive
Even if it were a
moment.
very, very serious monologue or a very sad monologue, that's life, though,
That's
isn't
life.
it?
And I think actors who really thrive on the Globe stage know that isn't a disruption, that's a gift. Yeah. That's a sort of performance gift. Yeah. And it's the same with weather. We're lucky it's not raining today. It does rain in the summer and audiences get wet.
Yeah.
And hardly any of them leave. That's what's extraordinary.
Incredible.
It adds to... That sounds... I don't mean to sound kind of like completely sort of Pollyanna-ish about it, but like it does sort of add to what's going on stage.
Yes.
It
adds to the whole experience.
It adds to the experience.
It doesn't happen anywhere else,
well,
does it?
And usually, somehow, there'll be some like verbal relevance in what the person is saying that suddenly makes sense that it's pouring with rain.
Yeah.
Because that's what Shakespeare
Oh,
does.
wow. I mean, we're celebrating Shakespeare just by being here. Who was he? Who do you think he was? Was he one person? Was he many? Did he really exist?
Yes. Yes, he did. So Shakespeare was born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, married, has 3 kids, comes to London in the 1580s, 1590s, and works very hard as an actor and a playwright, and latterly a kind of producer, a company co-owner, and a building co-owner. He ends up co-owning the Globe, and writes 37, 38 plays. The number is slightly in doubt, partly because a couple of his plays are lost. He collaborated. He wrote with other playwrights. Some of his early work are co-written plays. Some of his later plays are co-written plays as well. And it's quite possible that other writers did a bit of refurbishment work on some of Shakespeare's plays subsequently, particularly after he died. So it's not the case that there's no element of collaboration in the plays.
So
that
there are
Shakespeare
other
produced.
influences.
Yes.
But he was one person.
He was one person, and there's no question in my mind whatsoever that he was another person unconnected to theatre, like the Earl of Southampton or Francis Bacon.
But he was a lad from Stratford-upon-Avon,
Well,
and
he
the only
was.
reason people know the name Stratford-upon-Avon is because of Shakespeare. Otherwise, it would just be a place in Warwickshire like any other. So he was a lad from Stratford. What made him a genius? I mean, where does that genius come from?
Well, I think genius is sort of no respecter of background and class, is it? You know, genius can land on anyone. But I do think it's Shakespeare got an amazing education. So he didn't go to university like quite a lot of playwrights did, but he received a grammar school education in Stratford that I don't think we really, I certainly didn't really appreciate quite what that education was. He was taught solely in Latin from the age of 7 to about the age of 15. 10 hours a day, 11 months a year, solidly. So he was given a kind of, he was given the inheritance of the European Renaissance and just told, learn it.
Now, I understand. That gives him a love of words, and because he likes to play with words.
Yeah.
And I guess that comes from an education, particularly in Latin. But then he had the get up and go to think, I've got to go to London. And even though he left his family in Stratford and apparently, kept going back and forth between London and Stratford, he obviously knew that London was the place to go and make his name.
He does. So this is my guess. So let's not consider this the authoritative word of the Globe. But I think he knew he wanted to be a writer. He starts as an actor as well. But playwriting is the thing you can do in the 1580s, 1590s as someone who needs to earn a living if you want to write. It's how you make money from writing. You don't make money from writing from being a novelist. Novels don't exist. But as a playwright, you can. You can be paid for your work. You can receive effectively royalties for your playwriting. And as Shakespeare does, he then goes on to become a sort of businessman and producer. So I think it's that pull, that desire to be a writer and make a living as a writer that pulls him away from his home and family in Stratford, because London's the only place you can do that.
Yeah, and he became quite famous in his day, didn't he?
Extremely famous, yeah. Initially as a poet. So the first published work that appears with Shakespeare's name on the cover, in fact, his first published work at all, are 2 long poems. They're not plays at all. And that's what really makes his name. He becomes nationally famous in 1593 and 1594 for writing love poetry. And that then, he's already writing plays as well, but his name then kind of expands, if you like, to become a famous playwright as well. So he's by the time he dies in 1616, he's famous.
And rich.
And rich.
which, again, pretty unusual at the time.
Well, his family was sort of semi-well-to-do. His dad was quite a successful trader and glover. He suffers kind of a financial disaster, the dad, in Shakespeare's teenage years. So the family is in kind of difficulty. But Shakespeare definitely rises above the level of his parents. So he becomes a gentleman, so he gains gentry status, which he basically buys. But he feels very proud of that.
Well, that's interesting. You see, what sort of person was he, do you think?
The thing that's really hard is to look through Shakespeare's plays and poems and go, I think you're like that. Because he does everything. Like, I don't think he was like Macbeth. I don't think he was like Iago in Othello. I don't think he was like Prospero in The Tempest. But maybe he was like Beatrice in Much Ado About Nothing. Or maybe he was a bit like Romeo. You could choose so many examples.
Yeah, but you've written a book which looks into what may be his private life.
Well, a little bit. So I've written a book called Straight Acting, The Many Queer Lives of William Shakespeare. And I'm not setting out to kind of out Shakespeare, perhaps only a little bit. But I have looked at what it meant in the 16th and 17th centuries to explore same-sex desire, to explore queer desire, as Shakespeare does in his plays. Some of his comedies, his sort of disguised comedies feature young women dressing as boys who cause all sorts of erotic confusion.
There's an awful lot of cross-dressing, actually, in Shakespeare.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, the theatre industry itself was an all-male industry that employed adolescents, young men to play the parts of
So those amazing
women.
female parts were played in Shakespeare's day.
Were.
They were played by men.
By young men, adolescent boys.
Yeah.
And they probably did it really well. Otherwise,
which nobody thought odd.
No one thought odd in England. It would have been thought quite odd in other European countries at the time, where there were professional women actresses. Yeah, so it was, I'm going to say it was a choice in England. It was obviously a convention, and that convention had very long roots. But it was a sort of, I guess it was a sort of decision, a professional decision on the part of the theatre companies. There wasn't a law that said women couldn't perform. Sometimes it said there wasn't. There was sort of social pressure to suggest that they shouldn't. But again, that wasn't uniform across Europe. So there's this sort of interesting context for Shakespeare's work that allows an expression of queer desire, queer identity, that I think Shakespeare really explores.
Well, it's always said, isn't it? It's always rumoured that he had a romantic relationship of some sort with the Earl of Southampton.
So this is very interesting. So this is connected to his sonnets. So again, Shakespeare is a love poet. He publishes a long collection of sonnets in 1609, a large number of which, a large fraction of which, are written from a male speaker to a male subject. And they're highly emotional. Some of them are highly erotic. They've got a kind of very obsessive quality to them. And some people have said that because that book of sonnets was dedicated to an individual, a kind of mysterious individual called W.H., that's the initials that are used on the dedicatory page, that might be connected to a man called Henry Risley, H.W., who was the Earl of Southampton, who was the dedicatee of Shakespeare's earlier poems, 15 years earlier. Make of that what you will. I mean, it's sort of, I suppose it's possible. In my book, I suggest that it's quite unlikely that Shakespeare, who's a kind of middle-class playwright and poet, is even in a slightly disguised way writing quite intense, eroticized poetry to a very, very rich and high-ranking aristocrat. I think it's probably quite unlikely. But it's certainly true that Southampton was Shakespeare's patron at one time.
So he would have come to the Globe.
He came to the Globe. Yeah, we know that. We know that we know that Southampton goes to plays.
I see.
And it's pretty certain that he goes to the Globe among the plays that he goes to. Yeah.
It's fascinating delving into the life of somebody that so little is known about. I mean, that is just weird because he is still the most famous playwright in the entire globe, and the third most published, I think, isn't he? After
the Bible and
Agatha
Christie, I think is maybe the
but certainly the most famous playwright there's ever been.
Yeah, of course.
And yet so little is known about his life and death.
It's a real challenge, isn't it? Because what we want, I think, is a really clear biography where all the sort of beats in his life are sort of like laid out in front of us, and we can make the connections between the man and his art and feel really satisfied about that. We don't have that in terms of the historical record. But we do have quite a lot Because if we think about when Shakespeare was living, so 450 years ago he was born, more, he wasn't a royal, he wasn't an aristocrat, he owned stuff, so that's good. We have, records of ownership, and we even have records of some of the legal action he was involved in, so that's good, that's helpful. And we have the plays. Now, that's, compared to most people of Shakespeare's status at that time, that's loads. We can do a much better job telling the story of Shakespeare than we can quite a lot of other, even writers and people who were sort of in his world at the same time. So I actually feel quite lucky that more than 2 centuries of people digging around in archives and looking for scraps of paper has thrown up quite a lot. Yeah. So we can build up quite a kind of thorough picture of the world that he experienced in London, his life in Stratford, when he wrote the plays, the kind of things that he was reading and the sort of people he must have talked to create those worlds that he created.
Now, that's a question I did want to ask you, because he was writing in Elizabeth I's time.
Yes.
Did he ever meet the Queen?
Well, he would certainly have been in the same room as her. So the theatre company that he was a member of performed at court and performed for the Queen. Whether she would have known his name, I don't know. I think her successor would have done. So King James, who came to the throne in 1603, at the height of Shakespeare's powers as a dramatist, made Shakespeare's company royal servants.
So he may well have met him.
He certainly met him, and may even have known his name and been familiar with his writing. James's successor, James's son, Charles I, definitely knows the name because he owns Shakespeare's collected works, and he reads them and he makes notes in the plays. So we know that Shakespeare is a key part of kind of royal culture from a very early point in
Charles
his
III certainly.
Charles III is a big fan.
Certainly knows
Our patron.
his name.
Yes,
indeed.
Yes.
And interestingly, Elizabeth II opened this globe, didn't she?
She did in 1997.
All of those links through history. What's your favourite play?
Twelfth Night. Has been for years.
Yeah,
has
why?
been for years. I think as a comedy, it's one of the last sort of, I suppose it's a happy comedy, but it's one of the last comedies that Shakespeare writes that isn't really twisted. I quite like the twisted comedies as well, but the comedies get quite weird after Twelfth Night. And Twelfth Night is so finely balanced between humour and wit. So a lot of it is incredibly funny, but also a kind of bittersweetness and sometimes even a bitterness that I think it's just the perfect balance. And I've always loved the final act in Twelfth Night, when some of your viewers will know the story, where a shipwrecked young woman has disguised herself as a boy, ends up falling in love with her boss, even though her boss has sent her/him to woo another woman on his behalf, and she's fallen in love with him. It all gets terribly confusing.
Very complicated.
But at the end, her twin brother, whom she had thought was lost, was dead, comes on to the stage at the same time as her, and there's a reunion between the two twins, and it's the most perfect and beautiful moment in Shakespeare.
Well, thank you to Will, and if you want to find out more, this is his book. It's called Straight Acting, The Hidden Queer Lives of William Shakespeare. Until we meet again, from me, Anne Diamond, goodbye.